things that have meaning to us do something to us that are a little bit outside of our realm of control. So, I mean, I think that that's the thing, that if we can learn how to tap into that thing, whether that's in creating any particular piece of art or in a business or in how you just want to live your life, the kind of person that you want to be in the world is if you want something creative to happen with your life, you need to be connected and tapped into your meaning.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art. Bam! Clap doesn't work anymore. We'll see if that works. Hey everybody, welcome to Way of the Artist. And today, well, I'll just jump right into the title, creating the conditions for something to happen. And I think that as I understand it, this conversation has a couple of different angles that we're probably coming at it with, because there was something before we recorded that I said it pertaining to this matter, and it had a relationship, but sort of like a different kind of a relationship to Brandon. He had some ideas about it, and so I thought, okay, well, this title is going to be a good platform, jumping off point for a couple of different conversations that do share this idea of creating the conditions for something to happen. So, I think I'll just maybe it might be good. We'll each sort of explain our perspectives on this, and we'll go from there. So, in my own ideas on this, I recently just came off of a fantastic acting workshop, and in what I work on with actors, it's become very much more increasingly apparent to me that a lot of the work that and the things that I'm trying to pass along and imbue in everybody who I'm working with is that everything that we are doing is about creating the conditions for something to happen to us as actors, where something beyond our control sort of takes a hold of us, and why that's valuable for actors is it results in really truly present, alive, moment to moment acting. It's very engaging, exciting to watch, and it fits in line with that whole sort of that almost actor's cliche of I want to lose myself, right? I want to lose myself. It's in many ways it's the same thing of something happening to you. And I've had that experience as an actor where it's just like, it seems like just something is kind of just doing you. And you're just along for the ride. And I know that you can relate to that, both as an actor and as a writer as well. But so that's, I think that this is sort of an artistic, creative view on this statement, where about the creative process, and that creative process is not always so much an act of will as it is, again, as creating conditions, right? There is an effort in which we put in so that something can happen, and we can go on a creative adventure and see what comes out the other side. So I'll leave it there as that one side of it. Brandon, what do you want to say?
Yeah, so I would say that there's so much that we're trying to control all the time. There's so much that we're trying to consciously do or will into being or whatever. And there's very little that we notice that happens like automatically, that happens, almost, it's almost like we just take it all for granted. It's just kind of there. And I think something that dawns on me as we're kind of entering into this conversation is that so much of what you're trying to do as an artist is you're trying to get that automatic part of you to do a lot of the work so that you can do very little consciously, and you don't have to think about all this other stuff that you have to do, because the more you think about all these other things you have to do, not only does that get overwhelming, but you you don't really know how it works automatically, and it's very hard to replicate consciously. So to give you an example of this, for the last 10 breaths, I want you to do the exact same 10 breaths that you just did. Exactly. Do them just as you did. You don't know because you weren't even paying attention. They were just happening. You were just breathing, and you don't even know how they went in. You don't know how deep they were. And if we put you on video and we had that captured and we could look back at it and you could try to model it and replicate it after watching it again, but that's too late. It doesn't matter. It's already over. The moment's gone. You missed it. And as far as acting goes, you're in the moment, man. You don't get to rewatch and then redo it. And even if you did, there'd be a whole bunch of other problems, and so it goes on. But the other part of this, Evan, that I think is really interesting to me is talking about the writing aspect of this type of approach as well, because when you're writing, I truly believe that setting up the right circumstances does a lot of the work for you, and it actually makes you into a much better writer. Now, there's certain principles and practices and things that are helpful to understand. To give you an example of one of them, and there are many, but these would be things that I would try to teach somebody if they want to learn. Dialogue, for example. It's probably better. Now, I'm not saying this is across the board always the case, but it's probably better to say less and to not say things too directly in general. And the reason why is because if each character has a monologue, which are these big diatribes of talking, over and over, what it's going to do is it's going to drastically slow down the pace of the back and forth between those characters. But if the characters have a very quick, hey, how you doing? Good, cool. What's up? Oh, I wanted to talk to you about this. About what? About that? Oh, that thing. Oh yeah. Sorry, man. Yeah, it's okay. See what I just did there? Sorry about what? We're looking, we're watching. We have to watch their behavior. We have to pay attention. That was all very quick back and forth dialogue, right? And the pace was not obvious. I didn't even say sorry about what explicitly. It was assumed because I'm creating dialogue that I'm trusting the actors will bring that to life. The scene, the scenario, the props, all of that stuff will do it if I'm making a movie. And so circumstances, and the situation and setting all that up allows you to not have to work so hard on the dialogue, because now the dialogue is simply just adding to it. And so it just flows. And this makes it easier for the actors, and it actually makes it just sound better. And there's all these benefits of all this, right? Whereas if I said, if the dialogue went something more like this, hey, and the person says, hey, and they go, how's it going? I know you're going through a really hard time right now, and I'm really sorry that I crashed your car the other day, but it was really because my girlfriend had this thing, and you know her. And I started going on, it'd be like, you're filling me in on all this stuff now. You're giving me expository information. And you could have done all that in a fun, cool way if you just trusted the circumstances to reveal that information without them saying it. So I'm not going to talk anymore about that, but this is kind of an interesting angle that I want to kind of approach this from and see where this leads us.
Cool. Yeah, no, I'm game. And as speaking of lines, lines in movies that speak to this, what just popped into my head is from the original Top Gun movie. I've yet to see the new one, but the original Top Gun, which was a much loved classic for me as a kid. But there's a terrific line in there where Tom Cruise, where Maverick's in like a classroom session, and they're talking like theoretically moves to do and stuff like that. And he says to Kelly Margolis in there, and he says, "If you think you're dead." I always love that line. It's like, you think you're dead. And it's in many ways that has a lot to do with creativity and arts. I know it has a lot to do with acting, which, don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that there isn't a tremendous amount of intelligence that goes into preparing a role, writing a story. There are all of these things, but like in many ways, it's to piggyback off of what you're saying, and the title of this podcast is, how do you create the setup? Like, you do the sort of a lot of that legwork. You work with a certain kind of intelligence just to get your foundations, so that then you can let the thinking go, and you can become just a responsive, alive person. And as an actor, that means, you're being responsive to the person across from you, how they're talking to you, what they're saying to you, the meaning of what they're saying to you. And you're not thinking about it. You're really just receiving it and responding it. And, I know a little bit about writing, but it's like, as a writer, I know there's those, when you're in that sort of zone, you're really just like, you're responding to I don't know, there's a few ways I guess you could put it, but it's like, this thing that you're seeing play out in front of you. It's like, oh, they just said that, and it becomes a surprise. As a writer, it's always so much fun when it just like the next line comes as a surprise too, where you're just like, oh, and how they're going to respond to that, because you don't know. Mm-hmm. Like, you have an idea of what needs to happen, at least in my own sort of experiences with writing, is, that's part of that condition. It's like, okay, I've done my sort of work. I've outlined this story. I've done some work in understanding this as best as possible. And that understanding is nourishing me in the moment to do what I need to do. But I know what happens in this scene. So in this scene, this is sort of this is what's important. This is the meaning. This is the what's at the center and essence of this thing that has to be communicated. And in that pursuit of trying to achieve that, what happens from the beginning of that scene to the end is a surprise, right? And it is a kind of almost magic how that can happen, where it seems almost impossible, but next thing you know, you can be just staring at a page, 2 pages, 3 pages of dialogue, of story, or whatever, that's just so incredibly gripping. And you wrote it, but it's almost like, did I write this? Or was I just transcribing? So, yeah, I don't know. Brand, you got any comments on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think being in the film industry, for me, one of the, because I've done a bunch of different things in the film industry. I've been an actor, I've been a director, I've been a writer, I've been a producer. I've even worked on a bunch of other of the departments and roles. And, one thing that you learn in film, especially as you kind of, do bigger productions, is you really realize it's not all up to you. Like, there's so much that goes into it. Like, everybody plays a part, and everybody plays a really important part. And when a group of people and departments and all of this come together, it can be some real magic that happens. And so, if I would say this, for those actors out there, right? Like, I mean, you're learning to be responsive in the moment, and that's your job. I mean, your job in a lot of ways is to bring the work to life and have something happen for you that brings it to life, that maybe was only going to happen if someone put a real attention on that character in that situation in a way that none of us would have. So, for example, if I was the writer and you were the actor, I would have done my part to try to give you the best material to work with that I could possibly give you based on what I know and what I can do. But, I'm not playing that role that you're playing if you're reading from the work that I did. So, now you are bringing more to it. You're adding an element to it that, wasn't in the writing. And so I don't think you as an actor want to put pressure on yourself to be like, how do I do this? How do I bring the special thing to the writing? And, it's not about that. It's about, and I think this is where Evan's kind of work comes in a lot. It's about how do you create the circumstances for you within that work so that something can happen that maybe we didn't know would happen or was kind of unique. And that's what captures us. But then there's a third element, and there's fourth and a fifth and a sixth, but like there's a third element, which is then the director comes in and the director goes, okay, I see what's happening here. Let me, I was going to shoot it like this, but this is what's happening, and let me capture it this way. And then the cinematographer's going, if we light it like this, it'll give it this feel and that, and so everybody's coming in and playing a part. Now, if everybody does their job well, and you do your job well, you're going to look amazing, right? And if someone drops the ball, it can really hurt everybody else. But I think as far as what we're talking about, you have to kind of recognize, what do I control and what do I not control? And recognize that you probably don't control about 99% of most of it, right? And this probably even works, you could probably even talk about this in terms of painting and stuff. It's probably similar in certain ways. I would imagine, if someone who's in that medium, they might find that there's parallels here, but there's a lot of things that you don't control. So you should not try to control those things. You need to let those things be. And you can have input, and you can try to maybe encourage them. You can suggest, you can do lots of things to maybe if you're talking to the director or you're an actor, you might say, hey, so this is what I was seeing with the character, and this moment really stood out to me. What do you think about that? And then they're going to process that, and they're going to do what they're going to do with that. But you don't get to decide what they're going to do with that. But you can do that. But, at the end of the day, what you need to do is focus on doing what you're doing. And then even in your own work, and this is the hardest part, there's so much of your own work that you're not going to control. And this is where I think Evan and I are always trying to navigate that, right? Because what I want for you as an artist, and I'm speaking, to everybody, including myself, is what I want for you is I want it to be easy and fun. And I want something to happen for you that made it put you on the edge of your seat as you were in it, as opposed to this thing where you felt overwhelmed and you needed to control everything and you tried to do everything right. And it just becomes this overly bearing, like difficult, unpleasant thing to do, which often doesn't work when it's like that as well, which sucks. Right. So,
yeah,
but at the same time, I'll say one other thing about this. I'm not saying go in willy nilly and just be like, well, I'll just see what happens. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You're going to put a tremendous amount of care into details. There's going to be a tremendous amount of understanding and processing and work that you will probably do to figure certain things out. But once you get up there and you're actually doing it, or once you're facing the blank page or whatever's happening, you got to let it go. You got to trust that what you did is going to be enough. You have to work with whatever you got when you get there, and understand that so much of the work you do, it might never make the page, it might never make the stage, but you got to trust that if it needs to, it will show up. And if it doesn't, it won't. And it wasn't a waste of time to do it, because if it served you, if it helped you get there, that's good enough,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's, it's speaking on a little bit more on like the acting front. I know always one thing that I wish I had learned younger, or really understood on it, was that, I really, as the actor, was the expert on the role that I was doing. But part of that is trust. Trust is a is a big thing when it comes to that. But it's like, I feel like I was always trying to cater to too many other people, and like as you're saying, like a writer can have a lot of really beautiful details and things worked out about a character, but like a writer needs to have details worked out for a character to function in terms of a story, and the telling of a story, and the writer has all sorts of other concerns that are going on at the same time. And you would hope, I would think that any writer would hope that an actor would come in and understand the character more than they do. And that was like it, because like that's literally their only job. Your job is this one aspect of an entire universe, right? So you should know that more than anyone else. You should be more intimate, and that's something to really own, I think.
Can I add one thing about this?
Yeah.
And this is something, and maybe this is obvious to some people, but I feel like it's worth pointing out because there's lots of things that when I was younger, people assumed were obvious, but they weren't as obvious as they may have seemed. When you understand your character, it's not just that you understand their past, their present, and their future. You understand their situation. You understand their relationships to other characters. You understand what they want, what they're struggling with. You understand like all sorts of things about them. And these are things as a writer that you just won't get into because you really don't need to get the work done a lot of the time. Sometimes you do, but a lot of the time you don't. And so one of the things about knowing your character is just knowing your relationship and also remembering, hey, you know what? This happened over here. So that kind of affects this over here. And the writer might have missed that, and so would the director and people. And so you might draw attention to this and everyone's like, oh yeah. For example, Evan, I'll just give one example. On one of the films I directed, there's this moment where this character finds out that her husband or whatever has another partner. It's kind of a convoluted situation. But anyway, they're wearing the watch. I think that's the situation. And she's like, that's my watch. And when we did it the first few times, like nothing about the watch was really landing or resonating. It was just kind of pointed out and it was fine. It was an element in the story. But then I remember I walked up to the actress and I said, you know what? I think you really care about this watch. I think this was a meaningful gift. What do you think? And she's like, yeah, I think it was. And then the emotion, impact, and then what happened, it just turned the scene. It's just the moment, but it just brought something to the scene. And one of the guys from the crew came to me the next morning before we were about to go to set. He said, dude, he's like, we were all like, wow, it was really good. And then you walked up and you said something to her. And then it was like, holy crap, like a whole nother level. And all it was just seeing that, hey, maybe this watch matters. Now that was just me as a director noticing a detail, right? And that takes no shade off the actress either, because the actress was grateful for that. But as an actor, you can't rely on your director being able to catch that for you all the time. Those are the kind of things that you want to be finding as much as you possibly can. But having a director or someone come in and help you, there's no shade on you for that, because sometimes people just see it from an outside version and that's easier for them. But anyway, I just wanted to draw attention to that. Because,
I think that that's very much in line with, these are part of, I think, these very subtle things that aren't maybe necessarily as obvious with creating the conditions for something to happen. Because a lot of the times, as with so many things, the conditions that you need to create are internal conditions, right? Yes. And creating the condition of being open, receptive, collaborative, not feeling like you've got to, because like I actually recently had a talk with a director who was interested in taking one of my classes, because he had this realization that he's like, I have no idea how to talk to actors. Like, I have no idea how to work with them, how to speak their language, and it's not only a problem, but it's something that like I want to develop. And so we had a good chat about that, and it became this thing. I said, I don't know if my classes are necessarily right for what you're looking to do, but what I can tell you is that what an actor really loves is an environment of collaboration, right? Where you step in there with them and it's a real, like, you're stepping in, you're figuring out what's going on together, right? Like what's happening in the scene? What have you got? Like really being open to having something surprise you, you know, and working like that's really, it's about that kind of environment. And I think that part of the conditions for is that kind of allowing, you know, you need to have that, that condition of flexibility, of surprise. Because again, like I'm thinking more and more these days of artistry, creativity is like, it is always an adventure. Like it is like it's, and I mean that in a very literal sense. Like, I'm not saying it's like an adventure. No, it is an adventure. And in, I think maybe it was something you said, or it was something that I came across recently, but it was like in any, to paraphrase wherever I heard this, the idea is that any adventure involves getting lost at some point.
Yeah. You know what? I think I have a quote. Let me just read this, because this is something that I stumbled across when I was when I was just doing my writing one day. I was like, oh, you know, that's a good thought. Let me share that with you. Maybe this was kind of what it was, but I passed you this message. I said, on a great journey, you will lose your way only to discover that you were never lost at all. Was something that I thought as well. But I mean, we, you know, these are all kind of the same ideas, right? And in the sentiment that, you know, there's this part of getting lost, I think, which is a really important part of what we're talking about. We're talking about creating the conditions to get lost without fearing you'll lose your way. I think that's really in a lot of ways what we're talking about, because, you know, as you talked with me a lot about, and I think we shared quite a bit on the podcast, but about meaning, right? So if we look at I didn't tell her, this actress, what the watch meant. She figured that out. She's a good actress. But like, I just said, what if it's more meaningful? She had to figure out what the meaning was, but the meaning did something, and it did something enough to make a crew member come up to me the next morning and say, holy crap, something happened. You know what I mean? So I didn't do the work for her. All I did was suggest a condition of internal option, and she found internal option. She did the actor work, and she made it more meaningful, and it obviously worked, because the crew and the people who were witnessing that scene obviously were impacted by it, and so was she. So yeah, so, you know, as I'm thinking about this, you mentioned it's an internal condition. I think so much of it is, right? It's like, well, what does this mean to me? And why do I care? And really, it needs to really mean something. It really needs to matter. Like, it's not just well, I'm going to pretend this matters. No, it's like, it actually becomes meaningful, you know? And so then when oh man, like, I'm just thinking now, like, 'cause I haven't really acted much in the last few years because it hasn't been my focus, but I'm just thinking about it, man, like, I'm tapping into my acting work again. And I just thought of something meaningful, and then someone giving that away to someone else. And just, it actually just almost made me well up for a second. And I'm like, that's how quick this happens, right? You're like, whoa, I just got hit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, and it's like, I think that's a really big part. It's the tapping in, right? Yeah. It's like the tapping in, you tap into it, and then something happens. And it's also this word of happen, I think it's a very, you know, it seems like almost a very pedestrian word, you know, like it has a very vague and general feeling to it. It's like something happened, right? But it's also to me, it's become a word of tremendous wonder, because creativity is a kind of happening, right? And in some ways, it's like it's the word is appropriate, because it's like, well, what is it? And it's like, oh, it's so many things, right? It's so much. And I think that's why people get into the arts. It's why, you know, like you just telling that story of working on that film, you know, that's why your cinematographer does it. That's why so many people do it because the conditions happen, everyone's on their game, and everyone's there to see if they can do something great. But let's see what happens, right? It's all about seeing what will happen, and then sometimes something really does happen, and you go like, "Oh wow!" You're like, and everybody shared in that experience of this, like, holy shit, like something happened, man, like something happened. We're like, what was it? I don't know, but it was amazing. I mean, I know that's part of why I teach. That's part of why I teach what I teach, because for me, it's like I've never seen, like when I learned a lot of the approach and the technique that I teach now, it was like part of my motivation for teaching it is because I'm like, I just want to be around this more. I want to be, because I'd never seen so much genuine creativity like just occur in the span, in such a condensed span of time that I was there. It was just so tremendous, and I'm like, I want more of that.
Yeah.
I want to see more of that. I want to see more of this happening go on. And just as one other point to this, an old teacher of ours who we've had on the show, Ted Whittall, a while back, he had referred a book to me to read when that he enjoyed while he was studying his doing performance studies at UBC and stuff like that, and some interesting stuff in this book. And one of these articles, so these are all like scholars of performance and acting and stuff like that, people who've like dedicated their lives to just trying to understand it on a deeper level. And this one article stood out to me because it basically was just pointing out that acting and beyond that, like theater, so like just the theater, people assembling, whether that's live or you're going to a movie or something like that, there's this event that occurs, and after all of these years, it's still considered phenomenological. It's a phenomenon, basically meaning that like, we don't really know why we do this. We don't really know exactly why we assemble in this way and why we care so much about this, but we keep on doing this for thousands of years. People have come together to see stories performed in front of us, and we don't know why exactly. And I think that that's just fantastic, like and they even use the word of happening. Like it is a kind of happening that we want to be a part of, that we want to witness, and that we want to experience.
Well, I mean, and going into storytelling, I mean, there's so many things we could talk about with that. Something I learned about storytelling is that you actually go into a hypnosis when you're in a story that you're captured by, and we want to be captured. We want to be in this hypnosis, and it's like it's quite an interesting thing. There's a way in which you can actually verbally tell a story where you can get someone to be hypnotized into your story and be experiencing the story with you. And it's such a powerful technique. What you do is you tell the story, and it might be of yourself, but you tell it in present tense. And our minds are so powerful that what we do is, when you're telling it in present tense, our minds will jump in and we'll picture ourselves, even as you or even as whoever character you've created, and we will live in that while you're telling it. And we will literally, people don't realize they're doing this, but they're literally dropping out of their present reality entirely. They're still there. They're still sitting there. They're whatever they're doing, but their mind is not. Their mind is in a hypnotized state in this world of this story, and they're literally going along with it. And it's so powerful that I've had moments where I've done this, and people and I have cried together, laughed together, felt anger together. We've gone through incredible experiences, and it's so profound. And then the question really then is like, from a storyteller point is okay, well, that maybe that was a true story, right? Maybe that was something I touched into. Can I make something out of thin air and bring people into that experience, right? And I also believe that, just while we're on this topic, I really do believe that there's something about story which is so important in our learning process. And we we actually have a thirst to learn, but story is such a great way for us to learn. We learn in a way with story that we don't learn with other forms. And what I'm talking about a lot of the time is emotional learning, because when you experience something with somebody, even though it didn't happen, it feels like it happened and you get it. I've told this story many times. I talk about a story where, when I was a kid and I scored my first goal and all of that stuff. And, I'll just do it again just for the sake of it. So you can, I'm giving you, whatever. I'm just going to give a basic idea. But, I'm 10 years old. I'm 10 years old and I'm on the soccer field. I play defense, right? So I'm like in the back of the field and I'm playing, and my friend's dad, he's on the sidelines with all the other parents, and he's got his camera out, camcording, and he's camcording us, and we're in their zone, and the ball gets passed to me at the top of the box, and I kick the ball, and it goes in the net, and I scored my very first goal ever in soccer, and I'm jumping up and I'm celebrating, and my team runs around me, and they're bouncing around me, and I look at all the parents, and the camera's on me from my friend's dad. And I look, and everybody's parents there except mine. And in that moment, I realize this is one of the most important moments of my life, and they're not there. And so I think to myself, well, if this was really important, they would be here. If and so a lot of my life started to become about, I just need to do something important enough, and then they'll be there on the sidelines. You know what I mean? Yeah. Watching me, and I won't be alone. And even though I had my whole team around me and all these other parents, I still felt alone. And maybe as I tell this story, you have a touch, a little bit of what it feels like to feel alone, or to feel that moment, or maybe you're interpreting it a little bit different in your own way, but maybe you're there with me. And that type of learning, it's so profound, it's so powerful. And so I think we gather because how do you give someone that experience without story? How do you teach them that? How do you teach them what it feels like? Because that's what really matters, doesn't it? It doesn't matter what happened. It matters what it felt like. And if it's just a random kid whose parents aren't there and we hear it that way, yeah, that's fine. But if we felt it, if we were there, if we were the kid for just a second, what would it be like to not have anybody there for me when I did the most important thing in my life? And you could try that on. That's a learning moment for you. And now anybody you ever talk to who tells you what it's like to feel neglected or what it's like to feel abandoned, you might understand them a little bit more. And maybe this is your wife or your husband or your son or your daughter or your grandma or your grandpa, right? Who knows, right? Like maybe it's someone in your life, and now all of a sudden you might call your grandma. Makes me emotional because it's like it's all tied in there. But like we need story to learn. We need it because sometimes we're just taking shit for granted, right? We're walking along and we're like, I got to make money, I got to pay this bill, I got to do this thing, and then you meanwhile your grandma is sitting there, maybe, and she's playing solitaire, and your grandpa's gone, and you're not thinking about her. It makes me emotional, right? My grandma's not here anymore, but people's grandmas are, and they don't call them. But maybe this story, maybe you're here with me. Maybe you'll hear this and you'll pick up the phone and say, you know what, Grandma, I was thinking about you. Do you know how much that probably mean to her? Like, this is the thing. Like, you know, all this art you want to do, if you tap into this type of stuff, you're going to realize that this is all inside of you. This is all inside everybody. I'm not any different than any person out there. But if you will work with it, you will tap into it and it can do amazing things. And you know, those actors out there, because I struggled with this, maybe you have trouble crying on cue. Maybe you have difficulty getting into the emotion of the scene, just as an example. You know, this might be the work you need to do, right? Where you can, you know, and you parlay a moment from being alone in soccer to your grandma alone playing solitaire, you know, and it doesn't matter. The character is the person. It's all a person, right? And then we realize it's not even another character. That's us. We are the little 10-year-old and we are the grandma. We are all of it, right? And I don't want to get emotionally taken here in this podcast, but like, man, like it doesn't take much. That's the thing that I think that's the message I'm trying to, I suppose, communicate inadvertently. Because I don't know if I went into it with that intention, to be honest, but what a discovery. So anyway, I mean, look, like story helps us to get stuff that, you know, if you're 20 and you have a grandma that's 60 or 80 years old or something, you don't understand it because you're only 20, and that's fine. How are you ever going to understand it? But story can help you understand it. A 10-year-old might help you understand what it's like to be an 80-year-old, and you were 10. You know what I'm saying? So if you can tap into a 10-year-old story because you're 20, then you can tap into what it's like to be a 60 or 80-year-old because you understand that it's not actually that far apart. There's something that feels the same about it in a way.
Hey everybody, this is Evan, and this episode is brought to you by my book. Yes, I recently released a book called The Actor's Awakening, Connecting Spirituality to Craft. Expand yourself as an actor and your craft through a spiritual perspective. Take a journey that will explore universal philosophies and insights to help you understand human nature in a profound way, and develop practices to take your work to another level. Again, that's The Actor's Awakening, Connecting Spirituality to Craft, available on Kindle and paperback on Amazon. And as always, if you like the show, please subscribe. Yeah, listening to everything. It's. I mean, for one, it's making me think. It's like, yeah, I should call my grandma.
That's awesome.
For one, and yeah, it's making me realize that a lot of these conditions, like creating the conditions, in many ways creating the conditions for creativity, that is almost another title for this, because that's what that for something to happen is, and so much of that is tapping into what really truly genuinely has meaning to us as human beings. And I'm thinking about this so much through the lens of in this one through acting and when I'm teaching actors, and I feel like I'm getting a deeper, a deeper, more intimate understanding for myself over around a lot of these things, because it's like, so much of what how actors learn to work with themselves, because actors do need to learn how to work with themselves. They are the instrument, and you need to learn how to work with yourself in a way to bring yourself to places emotionally. And what I always teach is, like, don't go for emotional result, go for meaning. Tap into what has meaning to you, and the emotions will flow from that thing. That's the tap. The meaning is the tap for the thing to start pouring out. And as my Meisner teacher said to all of us in like the first day, is one among many things, but one of his big messages was, acting isn't showing, it's knowing. And that was sort of like the first part of, like, something that has a couple of other parts to it. And because the knowing part is knowing what has meaning to you. And I think that is an essential part to not just being an artist, but to being a human being who is at all interested in leading a genuine life. You have to be tapped into what has genuine meaning to you, because in so many regards, you know, I always tell actors, it's like those things that you can tap into that have real meaning to you, because I'm like, that's your gold. That is your gold, because you can keep coming back to it, right? Like, I know for myself, no matter what is, you know, for most things that are required of me in a scene, for me to figure out some way to find my drive to it, I just need to, you know, connect to my wife or my family in some way, right? And using my imagination, I can tell a story, right? I can tell myself a story around that thing that has meaning to me, that suddenly has me infuriated, or that has me so joyful, or that has me so, like, I can genuinely feel those things fully and take myself to that place all through that story. But it's always connected to a place of real, genuine meaning to me as a human being, because that's, again, that is where something can happen to me that's outside of my control, right? I don't really necessarily decide what has meaning to me, to a certain extent. To a large extent, you know, what has meaning to us is almost built in. And that's not to say that these things can't and don't shift, because they certainly do. There are things that, you know, have meaning to us at one point in our life, and they no longer have particular meaning to us. But in many regards, the things that have meaning to us do something to us that are a little bit outside of our realm of control. So, I mean, I think that that's the thing, that if we can learn how to tap into that thing, whether that's in creating any particular piece of art, or in a business, or in how you just want to live your life, the kind of person that you want to be in the world, is if you want something creative to happen with your life, you need to be connected and tapped into your meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, it's as we're thinking about this topic and we're working it out, you know, we're talking about creating conditions for something to happen. I mean, well, I mean, this is very open-ended. What do you want to happen? You know, I mean, I think, like, you know, for example, if you want to achieve something, right, that's what you want to happen. I mean, what's going to happen is up to you, right? So, you know, you need to create the conditions that are going to make it possible for you to do whatever it is that you want to do. And, you know, you can take this in a very practical way, and you can look at it and be like, okay, well, you know, I want to be able to win the Ironman or something or whatever, you know. Well, what kind of conditions do you need to create for that to happen? Right. And so then, you know, that's a creative process. Now you're going to need to figure that out. You know, what do I need to do? What do I need to learn? What do I need to participate in? And, you know, that's a very practical goal. And, you know, maybe you do it and maybe you come in 30th, right? And so you go, okay, well, I wanted to come in first. I wanted to win the thing. And I came in 30th. You know what? That's pretty good. Now, what's the difference between a guy who comes in 30th or a girl who comes in 30th and someone who comes in first? You know, what are they doing that I'm not doing? Or, you know, and so, you know, you're going to have to figure that out. And that's going to be an exploratory thing. When it comes to kind of the creative thing, it's like, well, the conditions for something to happen, you know, I mean, if it's an acting scene, Evan, you were sharing a story about an actor who was building a house of cards and they wanted to impress some people. And then when you really dug into it, it's like, well, I don't really care. And it's like, well, what about this crush? And they were like, oh, well, yeah. And they lit up and all of that. Right. So I'm just going to kind of streamline this story for the sake of my story.
All good.
Oh, good. So, so they found this crush, and she obviously had interest in this person, and so it's like, well, I'm building this house of cards to impress them. Now, they have another scene partner that's going to come in, and they're going to want something from them, and they're going to have to do their repetition exercise, I imagine, with them, and that person wants something from them. So, for this actress and this other character, this to have a really like to have a great scene, the context of the writer, you might go, okay, well, I have this character that's trying to build this house of cards, right? I'm writing this, let's say. I have this character that's trying to build this house of cards to impress this person that she really kind of has a crush on, right? And she wants to, for whatever reason, demonstrate that she can do something really cool, and, and maybe whatever, she thinks this will work. But this guy comes in. Now, this other guy, it would make sense. Now, I always look at story, I'm like, what makes sense? Work with what makes sense. And I'm not saying that it should go this way. I'm just saying it could go this way. But if that character really likes her, and that character finds her to be their crush, now you create a little love triangle and a bunch of challenges, right? Because if they find that out, they're not going to want this house of cards built. And they find out, you know what I mean? Like who knows what's going to happen, right? It's going to create all sorts of interesting things. And I'll say one other thing about story, and this is a lesson that took me a long, long time to learn. And so, the sooner you learn this, I think the better. Evan, you brought this up, I think, very early on, but it took a long time for this to really make sense to me. But dilemma is such an important part of everything, not just storytelling and art. Most things are not a simple choice. Most things are a choice between two bad outcomes. And there's a damage that we're trying to avoid a lot of the time. And when you start to see the damage, you'll begin to start to have a lot of conditions for really cool things to happen, because like it's very easy if you're like, oh, I don't care if I hurt this person's feelings. I don't care if anything happens here. That's very easy. But what really good art is we make it not easy. We make it so, when it's done well, it's not easy to do. So now you have this crush and trying to build this house of cards for them. And then you have this other person that really likes you and you want to let them down easy, but also you want to get them out of the door before this other person comes, because really that's who you want to see. But, that's their side. But then what's going on for this guy, and what are they there for? And what, and so you fill in those stories. Pretty soon you got a great bunch of dilemmas and problems and situations and things that are going to create a very interesting and compelling scene. And does anybody here know where that's going to go? No, none of us do. And that's what's exciting, right? That's what's exciting about it. And that's I think, in art, I mean, that's what we want to achieve. But here's the other thing. So much in life is like that. And we get freaked out when that happens in real life, though.
Yeah.
Because we don't like the unknown. We want a sure thing. And I'm just going to tell you right now, sorry, I hate to break it to you, but anything that's really important and matters, it's very rarely a sure thing. So buckle up.
Almost nothing in life is a sure thing. Other than one thing.
That's the only thing. But nothing's a sure thing.
It's I would like to add, because dilemma is something was identified back by the Greeks as like for storytelling. Like dilemma was like the first sort of rule is put your character in some sort of a situation of a rock and a hard place. And and I would actually say to what you said, it's like it's not actually a dilemma isn't always necessarily between two terrible things. Very often it does make for good drama when it's like you've got really two terrible looking paths to walk down. But there's a very compelling dilemma when you have two wonderful options that are presented to you, because it becomes torturous.
What's the right choice?
What's the right one? It's like they both look so good. I could go and do this. I could I could.
So let me clarify though, Evan, because I do agree with you, but what I think what I said was damages. So like if you choose the other good choice, it means you damage not getting that choice. So if you make the wrong choice, you still feel a pain, because if that was the right choice and you chose the wrong one, you may have lost it. So this could be like a situation where you have two suitors and you could go with suitor A or suitor B. and you choose suitor A and they turn out to be a disaster, you go back in your mind thinking, oh man, I should have chose suitor B. They were the right choice,
Yeah.
but you don't know. Suitor B might have been a disaster as well. But the thing is that there's a pain in the choice and a pain in it
Yeah.
in the moment, before the moment, and after the moment, that we're all dealing with, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, isn't that kind of like along the lines of like the plot of Closer
Probably.
or
Yeah.
something? Like those stories where it's like they have to pick between two people, and then at some point they start second guessing their decision on the person that they chose, and then all the outcomes from that. There's always good stuff there, but it's like and what's interesting about that too is like, yeah, a good writer sometimes, even if you don't have same thing with acting too, I guess it's like that's the beauty of imagination. The power of our imaginations as human beings is what, just the things that we can experience through it. And one of the things, where was I going with this, Brandon? We were talking we were talking about Closer, talking about dilemma. We were talking about yeah. So these things can take on a life of their own just through imagining. You might not have any real personal experience with it, of being in like a love triangle of some kind, but you tap into some sort of thought, into some sort of circumstance where you can just play it out in your mind of like, oh, what would happen if you had this character, they're like, we'll say you had this, there's a woman and she's got these two lovers and they're both fantastic. They both have these terrific, I think actually there's definitely lots of stories like this, but it's like, it's like, and they're both fantastic, but she's now in a situation where she has to make a choice as to like who she's going to go with. Right. And this is all at the beginning, not at the end, where it's like the choice at the end and happily ever after. No, it happens at the beginning, but then things aren't working out.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that, just like that can tap into the well too. That can tap into the place of meaning and be like, what does that mean? What, like, and exploring those things, even though you might not have any personal connection to it, like our empathic and empathetic abilities as human beings can really live things out pretty truthfully. And I mean, that's really what, especially like what a great writer and a great actor's job truly is. And I'm just kind of realizing actually like that's like one of those unifying things between like writers and actors, is that that empathetic ability of being able to take on a set of circumstances that might be entirely foreign to you, entirely alien to you, and live them out, touch upon it, and experience them as being real, is something that both of those disciplines are heavily involved with. So it seems like it's such an obvious thing, but for me, it's like I'm having a moment right now being like, oh yeah.
Well, I think it's good to share, because I think the more that, say, actors and writers feel akin to each other, I think the better, because maybe it helps the forms of communication be stronger. And I think not all writers are the same and not all actors are the same, and this is an obvious statement surely, but like some writers are, they're very analytical, they're very practical, they're very systematic, and they don't really think a lot about how anybody feels, honestly. They just understand the principles of story and they know how to marry them together in a way that makes what seems like a pretty compelling story. And it's quite honestly entirely on the actor to try to bring an emotional life to it, because the writer had literally like almost no understanding of how people might have felt in those circumstances, but knew enough to put together the right dramatic components and whatever. And that's possible, right? And then you can have a director too, who, they're very visual and they're very concerned about visual effects and action sequences, and they could care less about the dialogue sequences. Those really just pass the time to help them get to the action sequences, what they really want to do, right? And so if you're an actor in these scenarios, you might not have the same support, and so maybe you appreciate it more when you do. But in those cases, it's going to be more on your shoulders to be the one to bring the life to it. And every film and everything we do, it's always going to be a little different people, unless we're working with the same people and the same type of director and same type of things over and over, writers. I mean, maybe, but for the most part, if we're working on different crews and different things and over, it's going to be different in certain ways. And, so I think one thing to kind of keep in mind is like, if you have lots of support, try to really, recognize it and be appreciative of it. And if you don't have much, then learn to develop the skills where you can look at it and go, okay, like no one understands what I need to do here, but I'm going to do my best to be a professional and bring that, because they don't know how I'm doing it, and they might not even know it needs to be done, quite frankly, but you do. And so you bring it up and you bring it to the table, and they will probably appreciate you, most likely, if you help them see something that they just had never even knew existed. It was just like they didn't even know that mattered, right? So, and this is just the film industry. I mean, look, I'm sure there's all sorts of other mediums. We could talk about how the hell does a band stay together for years. I don't know. I'm sure if we got someone on who had been in a band for a long time, they could probably tell us some of the ins and outs and the challenges, and like, my wife doesn't want me to play right now, or whatever, or my husband doesn't want me going out to nightclubs, to do this, whatever. Like there's all sorts of problems that we face, right?
Yeah.
So, like, we're doing our best here. But you try to create conditions where you can get the thing to happen that you want to happen, right? And if we're talking about acting, because that seems to be what we've been focused on a lot today, and writing, the thing that you want to happen is probably a great scene, right? Great moments, great performance. Okay, so now this is what this is about. What are the conditions that would create something? And not saying what the great performance is, but that the conditions make it possible for it to be possible, right? And there's no sure thing that it will happen, but you try to do your best to set it up so it could, right? And that gives you at least a fighting chance.
Yeah.
And if you're working with great people, I think you have a much, like, really good people who aren't going to drop the ball and everybody's doing their job on an expert level, the chances of success are a lot higher. If you're working with a lot of amateurs, student filmmakers, this type of thing, it's going to be more challenging. It's just the bottom line. I mean, it's just the reality, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't try. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do everything you can to try and help the situation be the best it can be. But, maybe you can inspire the rest of your team to raise their game, if you raise yours, right? Maybe you can be a leader in that respect. Even if you don't have control over everything, people do. Well, I'll share one story, Evan. I know I've talked a lot here, but let me just share one story. There was a story, a movie I did in Vancouver Film School, and student film. And it was really two or three actors in the whole thing, but mainly it was between me and this one other actor, and he was quite experienced and I was brand new. And I remember I had to play this character with like dissociative disorder, and I just came in and I just went all out, and whatever I was doing was working. It was working, and it was something interesting was happening. And they called one of the teachers down to come meet me and talk to me. And they were like, because people were talking about it. Like the other students on campus were talking about this movie that was like really like coming off the page. It was coming to life. And like, I think everybody who was involved kind of really raised their game, because like at that moment in my life, I probably was 18, maybe 17. It was probably 19, maybe. I don't know. It was like it was the most important thing to me in the world. And all I wanted to do was try to figure out how to, And I was so much flying by the seat of my pants that I didn't have enough training or skills to know what would be the right thing to do or the good thing to do or whatever.
Right.
And like when I was sorry, I know I'm still talking here, but when we were doing the reverse, I was not mailing it in. I was giving it everything on the reverse. It was on that character, but I was still bringing everything I possibly could. And and I guess that was a bit unusual, but it was making the other actor really bring it, right? So it really, you can do a lot just by trying to bring your A game to stuff, right? It can affect other people. It won't always work,
Yeah.
but it can make an impact.
I mean, when you show up with passion, right? Like, because again, like you're connected to that meaning. You don't need to show it. You know it. Like it's in you. That passion is there, and it's it's kind of funny this story because it's true. Sometimes like you take a swing at it. Like you take a crack at it, and when in any sort of creative endeavor, and you don't know, like you don't know if it's going to turn out, and then it's like, and then you see something, it's like, oh shit, something is happening, like you've actually hit it, it's actually gonna like there's something going on, and it's extraordinary how people take notice of that. And just your story, I was watching this was like a little while back, it was like an interview of Jamie Foxx, and Jamie Foxx was talking about working on Django Unchained, and he was talking about how he remembered walking onto set and Christoph Waltz was doing, they were filming one of Christoph Waltz's scenes, and Jamie Foxx walks in, and there's Leo, like off camera, he's watching the monitors of what was going of the scene, and Jamie Foxx was like what's going on, man? And he was just like, I don't know, something's happening. Like he was just riveted. He was pulling on. He's like, I don't know, but something's happening, man. Like something's, and that's what I love about that shit, is just like, again, the title of this thing just seems so appropriate. It's just like, that's so, to anyone who's ever been involved in, like, the arts with that kind of passion, has been fortunate enough to be a witness to one of these events, like it's like, that's like, what's going on? It's just like, I don't know, but something's happening.
Yeah.
Like, something's happening right now. Like, well, like where you're looking at someone who's just dialed in, who's just tapped in, like,
and you don't know what it is, and that's why it's so captivating.
Yeah. And then it's funny because then people, then you'll get the the intellectual types who will try and break it down retroactively. Totally. It's like, oh, this is why he did it. You see how he inflects his voice up at times, but then down at others. I think that's really what it is. And then you'll have another person like, no, it's not so much the inflections, right? Look at what he was doing with his eyes. Yeah. It was his eyes that was really, and then it's just like, and Christoph Waltz, like, would just be like, I don't know what I did. I was just, I was living, he was, because he's one of those guys who gets it. To me, Christoph Waltz is one of those guys who gets it. He's an interesting character. But
I love the voices. But you know what, man? Let's we got to wrap this one up.
We do. We got to wrap this one up.
I've been loving this, but I got to go. So I'm going to introduce my beer first, if you don't mind. I'm having another one from Blind Men Brewing. So it's my second beer from these guys. This one's called their Super Session, and it's a light beer. It's the lightest beer I think I've maybe ever had. It's only 3.0% alcohol, but it really does taste very, very light. So it's been enjoyable. Not a lot of flavor. Almost, and this almost sounds like a knock against it, I suppose, but it's almost a little watery because it's so light. It's just very, very light. I would say that this is a perfect beer for really hot day. You just want a cold drink and you want to drink it pretty quick, and you want to kind of like, you don't want to get like slammed either. It's one of those. It's tasty. It's got a little bit of a that bitter beer taste to it, but very very light. Anyway, it's a good one. It's interesting. It wasn't quite what I expected, but I've enjoyed it. I would say on a really really hot day, this probably be a great beer to go for. On general, probably not my first choice, but so far I'm really liking this brewery, and that's what I gotta say.
Very nice. I'm drinking a beer from Backcountry Brewing in Squamish, BC, and this is a collaboration with Arcturix Climbing Academy. Apparently, it's like an interesting combo: climbing academy and beer. Don't do them at the same time, probably. Okay. But I just was sucked in by the name of it, and it's called "Living in a Van Down by the River," and it's a West Coast Pale Ale, and it's delicious. Yeah, it's a little bit lighter as well. It's 4.5%, and but it's nice and juicy, but lots of flavor and light, all those stuff. So, yeah. I'll go ahead first with some closing comments, I suppose. Yeah, I didn't expect this to be such like a conversation that was very very sort of acting and writing, very sort of like, focused. But I using these things as like just a frame for like a broader conversation. But no, I was happy that we were talked a lot in these kinds of ways, because it's part of our deeply parts of our backgrounds, and a lot of time our conversations are maybe a bit more like universal in tone. But this was a lot of fun doing this, and for me this conversation, I think I'm definitely going to be coming back to this conversation and listening to some of this, because this helped me to just have a deeper sense of some of these things that do help us to create these conditions for something to happen. Again, tapping into the thing that has genuine meaning to us is certainly something that's way up there. In terms of being able to, it kind of goes up there with like vision. We've talked about vision, and meaning, I think, is kind of like goes right along with it, right? Like that vision comes out of a meaning to you, right? And is something that is a part of that sort of North Star idea, where that helps us to keep oriented as we're going along, that helps us to guide our actions, that helps us to guide our decisions, and helps us bring us to life in so many kinds of ways. So I would say that, like, yeah, to really ask the questions and explore the things of like, what do you genuinely really actually care about? Not ideas, not intellectual ideas of what you care about and what you think you should care about. What do you actually care about? What is actually meaningful to you? And what will you do with that? Mm-hmm. What can you do with that? What excites you to do with that? But do something with it. Do something with it, because that's how things happen.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So I mean, this has been really inspiring for me as far as like acting goes, because acting has not been a focus of mine personally for a few years, and I still love it, but just tapping into some of this storytelling and stuff is like, oh yeah, that's what I love about acting. I love being in it, and the spontaneity of the scene, and all of that, and I think my love for acting has become so pure in these last several years of my life, whereas maybe when I started, it was a lot more, I love acting, but I want to be famous, like, or something. Like, it was kind of like the veneer yeah, I really love this, but like I also like want something out of it, right? Whereas now I don't want anything out of it, and and so I think for me, when I tap into it, it's a very pure kind of like, yeah, but I just really like doing it. I mean, and so I think that's really cool. I think I love talking about writing and storytelling. It's probably my favorite thing in the world. So that's been an absolute joy to discuss and get to share. And I, as much as I want to be a great storyteller in my life, I really implore others to do the same, because I just think story is such a wonderful thing. It can do magic for us and for others. So, I think being open to embracing it, if you have an inclination to, I think, it's worthwhile. And then final notes. I mean, man, I don't have any real like wise ass comment to say at the end of this. Honestly, I don't. All I can say is like, look, I don't think it has to be as hard as you're making it. That's probably the takeaway for me. Because when I was younger, I used to think I had to be something, I had to control this, I had to do all this stuff. And it was just so much work and so much pressure. And I think as I've gotten older, my work has definitely gotten better, definitely. And I know I've gotten better, and I know I have some work to do and some places to go with that still. But it's weird, because when you start making the conditions meaningful and you start setting them up in the right way, it's actually a lot easier to do the stuff that you maybe worked so hard to try to do when you were trying to control everything. So for those of you out there who are doing this and maybe you feel overwhelmed, or maybe you just feel like, there's so much to do, it's so hard or whatever, go back to more the foundations of what sets up what you're doing. And I don't know what that means for you exactly, because I might be talking to many different artists and many different mediums, but go back to what sets up something great to happen for you. And don't worry so much about trying to make something happen or control something to happen. Set yourself up so something can happen, and trust that you have it in you that something will happen. If given the right ingredients, you will have it in you to make something or perform something or create something or whatever it might be that is pretty cool.
Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.